What's good, guys? It's Ilsun 4K, and today I'm here to talk to you about something so awesome and amazing, it doesn't even matter that we waited nearly 3 decades for it. Yes, 3 decades, and you know what I'm talking about. The old, greatest superhero TV show ever in the animated realm, X-Men from the old Fox Kids days, was picked up by Disney Plus and Marvel Animation Studios and being released under the moniker X-Men 97. And this picks up right where the last series left off. I mean, right where the last series left off. And it's beautiful. Unfortunately, Charles Xavier is no longer with us, much like he was at the end of the series, but that's just the beginning of a bunch of cool plot twists that I can't get into. But the sad part is this. Disney Plus has only released 2 episodes of this 10-episode series, which are known as To Me, My X-Men and Mutant Liberation Begins, as we watch streaming services slowly slip back into everything we fucking hated about cable. Disney, you greedy motherfucker. Anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about how awesome this is. This is the TV series that all millennial kids held near and dear to their hearts growing up and taught us a lot about acceptance. What's ironic is this series' tone and message is even more relevant now than it was once upon a time back then. And that is, no one should be judged for who they are, who they love, or what they do, so long as they're not hurting themselves or anybody else. And that's looking at you, Magneto, but even that has a cool plot twist in it. And speaking of plot twists, there are plot twists and turns galore in this for the 2 episodes we got, including the ending of the second episode, which is somehow a cliffhanger, but it doesn't matter because, again, this is something you need to see if you even remotely enjoyed the old series, because, again, nostalgia rules right now. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching, and watch me geek out over this show, and I hope you geek out over it too. Whoever handled the writing on this show, let me start off by saying, absolutely killed it. The series starts out with Xavier being dead, of course, and we get a shot of a warehouse where we see a mutant who is being put in against his will by a human, being told by the humans that someone will pay $10,000 a mutant for every mutant they bring in. And then they put the collar around the young man's neck that takes away their powers, which is, of course, from the previous season. As you can imagine, this does not fly well with the X-Men, quite literally, as Storm flies in through the warehouse top window, breaking it, causing a hurricane and blowing everybody in the warehouse around in a circle. But what's really interesting is the humans are ready for this, as they put these hand blasters on their arms that looks like a Mega Man affair that proceeds to shoot lasers at the X-Men. Of course, the X-Men make quick work of the whole human thing, dispatch everybody, the humans get arrested, and from there we find out that Cyclops is now going to befriend this young man and bring him back to the School of Gifted Mutants, which we now cut to. Cyclops is then seen talking on a video screen to the United Nations, because they work together now, asking them, how do the humans have Sentinel technology when the Sentinel factory was destroyed a long time ago, again in the previous season? The continuity is beautiful here. Apparently the UN has no idea how that could happen, and Cyclops decides to find out for himself. What they do is they go to the jail where the guy who tried to assassinate, or well, did assassinate, Charles Xavier is there, and using Cerebro, they go inside of his mind and find out the individual who was making the Sentinels is still around and is making somewhere them located out in the desert. The X-Men go out to the desert and locate the Sentinels and have one of the coolest and quickest battle scenes you've ever seen, as they dispatch around 6 to 7 Sentinels right away, and they catch the individual who is making them and have the UN come down and arrest him, and he says this isn't the end and he'll be back because, of course, that's what superhero villains do. What happens at the very end of this episode is something we all saw in the trailer, and that's where the X-Men get an intruder alert inside of the School for Gifted Children and run inside to find Magneto sitting in the main chambers where Xavier would have sat. They ask him what he's doing there, and it comes to the ultimate plot twist that we've seen so far, that Magneto is now left everything that Charles Xavier had. His money, his will, and last but not least, the entire school was left to Magneto. And this is the end of the first episode, and they do a great job with it. Fast forward to the second episode, Mutant Liberation Begins. We find out that Magneto is actually looking to change his ways, as it cuts to new scenes of Magneto saving humans. Yes, Magneto saving humans, including a cool instance where there's a Ferris wheel that's falling apart, and as it's falling apart, there's children in the Ferris wheel, of course, trying to be saved by firefighters, and all of a sudden the Ferris wheel just floats itself back together from falling apart, and we see Magneto and he flies away. We get a couple more instances of this, and eventually it cuts to Magneto being briefed by the X-Men asking, what the hell are you doing here? Magneto says, out of respect for Charles Xavier, he's going to carry on his will and power and decides to turn good. Yes, Magneto has turned good, and that's really something we're all skeptical of. I'm skeptical, you're skeptical, but nobody's more skeptical than the X-Men, especially Cyclops. Cyclops proceeds to ask Jean Grey to try and read Magneto's mind, and Jean Grey says that's just not an ethical use of her powers, and how do we know he's not going to change his mind later on? Again, good writing. Now, moving forward from there, the United Nations find out where Magneto is and shows up to the school to arrest Magneto. And after scaring the living crap out of them, using their helicopters against them, and basically going to turn them into a living blender, Magneto asks, Are you going to give me a fair trial? And if so, I will go. And Magneto submits. They put the power-robbing collar on his neck, they arrest him and take him away in the helicopter, and the X-Men look on, mildly concerned for their somewhat newfound friend. Now, we cut to the scene, of course, of Magneto in trial in the courthouse, gigantic courthouse, and it turns out that there are rioters there that are planning to kill Magneto and break into the room. Now, there's this rioter group called FOH, which I'm assuming stands for F out of here, that breaks in, but there's one of them that's this super assassin. I mean, he is unbelievable. He beats the brakes off of Cyclops. I mean, absolutely demolishes Cyclops and proceeds to get to the main courtroom. Meanwhile, back at the school for gifted children, Jean Grey is pregnant with Cyclops' baby and is about to go into labor, and the only person left with her is the last person you would expect to be there for a baby delivery, Wolverine. Yes, Wolverine decides to take Jean Grey to the hospital, so while all of that's going down, at the courthouse, Wolverine can't even go and help or get the distress call because, again, it's 1997. Cell phones don't really exist yet. Anyway, what happens is, this individual who's the assassin that I was talking about has a gun that can actually permanently disable powers, and he goes to shoot Magneto, and Storm throws herself in front of it and gets shot. Magneto, seeing this, becomes enraged and realizes the error of his ways possibly, and takes the courtroom judges on their panel and the individual who shot at him and floats them up to space after ripping the entire courtroom out. I mean, all of the panel just lifts up perfectly like a Lego piece, and Magneto proceeds to float to the edge of the atmosphere where you can see the people are a little bit struggling to breathe, if not for Magneto's shield, and they're blowing out the cold air breath. Really, really well done. And Magneto sits there and looks at all of them and says, I want to kill you, basically. I would love to destroy you. But unfortunately, due to the will and testament of my friend, I can't. So I'm going to ask you very politely, do not prove me correct, prove Charles correct. And on that note, they pardon Magneto and let him go. Magneto gets pardoned for all of his crimes because, he decided not to kill the panel of judges. Fair trade if you ask me. Now, what happens at the very end of the episode is a knock comes on the door, and I won't tell you who's on the other side of the door because it's so mind-bending and mind-blowing that I just can't spoil that part for you, and you have to watch to see for yourself. And to be quite honest with you, that quick little synopsis there is just like barely anything. You have to see this to appreciate it. Forget if you think I spoiled anything, just go watch it and enjoy it because it's fantastic. Now I gotta say, the one thing about this show that really stuck out to me as a young boy was the serious tone and the depth of its message. And while I didn't completely understand what it was a simile for in the real world, I still understood the X-Men struggle, and I was a little bit curious about today's modern world, how this series would be going, and if they would water it down and dumb it down a little bit, or maybe make it seem a little preachy, but they didn't do any of that. It is completely as flawlessly executed as it was back in the 90s and stands more so true today than ever before, as you heard me say in the beginning. The coolest part about this show that really gets everything going, I should say, is the voice acting. The voice acting is rather unique because we do have some returning voice actors and we have some new voice actors. But what's really cool is the fact that some of the returning voice actors aren't doing their old characters. They're doing new characters and letting new voice actors handle their old characters. And even though the tones have changed from the voice actors we all know and love, things are still perfect. The mannerisms of everyone are there. You have Beast, who is this well-spoken, educated individual. You have Cyclops, who's a firm but still loosely based character. Jubilee is a young and fun teenager when she talks. You have the likes of Wolverine, who still sounds like he'll kick your ass just for looking at him funny. And of course, you have the goddess herself, Storm, who speaks like a true prophet and goddess and sounds like she's a powerful being just off of how she goes. Flawlessly executed, and everybody sounds fantastic. Even if there's a little bit of an adjustment at first, the immersion from this is still there. Next up, we have to talk, of course, about the animation. The animation in this is even more amazing than the old animation, and the old show had a serious budget behind it that allowed some really cool effects, but this is like nothing before. When we see the X-Wing blow up and Cyclops is flying through the air and he uses his eye blast to soften his landing by, using it as a reverse thruster, in addition to being very smart to think of that, the way it looks is very incredible. It looks awesome. Watching Storm walk through the desert and using her lightning bolts to go and turn the sand into glass is clever as well, but the way it's executed is perfect. Just the simplistic fact of her blowing wind around looks so good. There's a scene where they're at a rave, and it shows Gambit looking at Rogue, and Gambit's face is changing colors due to the light, and it refracts and reflects, and as someone who was the DJ in the rave scene of New York City, I can tell you that's exactly how it looks in real life. The way it bounces off, someone put a lot of effects into this and a lot of thought, and it just looks great across the board. Not just the superpowers, but everything. Especially Magneto's shield when he goes and lifts the courthouse, how it just shines around him and everything just looks so perfect. Lastly, of course, we have the storytelling. The storytelling in this is perfect. I mean, it is so cool because Charles Xavier is dead, and we've never really had to imagine what it would be like if Xavier was gone. I mean, we've had the idea of it in comics, but to actually see it being pulled off in the animation series that we grew up with is mind-bending. The way that they're taking everything and throwing plot twists after us and throwing tensions at us and throwing the idea of thought-provoking affairs. And is Magneto going to be good? Is Cyclops really going to leave because, you know, him and Jean Grey are having a baby? It's all stuff that really weighs in the mind and makes you wonder, how long can it go on like this? What happens? How long until something just snaps and gives, because there's so much tension building up and it's organic. Nothing about it feels forced. Nothing about it feels like it's just there for the sake of being there, like it's just like hacked in or tacked on. It's all beautifully written and intertwined in a way that, again, is really thought-provoking and makes you wonder, where is it going to go next? And you're probably not going to have the slightest idea because, again, the writing, the animation, and everything else behind it is done perfectly. One thing I really got to say about this is that this series has so much hype for it that came out of nowhere, almost as much as the announcement for the series itself. I mean, nobody saw this coming. No one expected this, but we were all happy. And let's be quite honest, Marvel's been having a few misses the last few years, and I think that's because, much like Sony, Marvel is learning not every superhero IP is good enough to warrant its own movie or movie series for that matter. And I can't blame them because, unlike Sony that just keeps on trying something to see if it'll work, Marvel had instant success with Iron Man, and that's ironic because as a comic book fan in the 90s, Iron Man wasn't really a comic that I searched out or was even predominantly displayed in the comic book stores during that boom era. Iron Man was a little bit of an afterthought, an older affair, but the casting of him and Robert Downey Jr. playing him just fucking murdered it and made him immensely popular right away while we waited for the big one, Spider-Man, to show up after being in Sony's hell. And I can't blame them for trying to get that lightning in a bottle twice, but it's just not going to happen. You know, as cool as Ant-Man was and stuff like that, that's not a guy that really needed more than one movie. Cameo appearances, absolutely hilarious, perfectly well done. I will say, though, as far as the series goes, Kevin Feige, hope I'm saying the name right, Kevin Feige is absolutely knocking it out the park. I feel like he really sat down with his team and watched the entire old series with them in a room somewhere and said, I want this, but better. And they were like, okay, you got it, Chief. And they're delivering that, and so far, seemingly a little bit better. Everything is so familiar, yet unique and different at the same time. We're really living in an era where we got it good after all of the delays that other things have had. And I'm really excited to see where the series goes, because I don't think we're actually going to get a bad episode out of the 10 series. I think we might get a meh episode here and there, but to imagine a bad episode is extremely difficult off of the fact that there's only going to be 10 of them. And to be quite honest with you, if there is even a bad episode, I bet we're all still going to be like, all right, you know what? That was kind of cheesy, but it still moved the story along, and that one part was cool. But I don't think we're going to have that. And lastly, what's really unique to think about is the fact that this is actually going to show us hype towards getting the X-Men into the Marvel-owned cinematic universe. Fox didn't really know what they were doing with X-Men after a while. I liked some of the X-Men movies that came out. The first two were great, and I think one of the first classes was awesome. But everything else was kind of meh or just bad, including that weird reboot with the Dark Phoenix in it. I don't know, man. It just doesn't make sense. And the rumor is that the new Deadpool Wolverine movie is actually going to start to segue the X-Men to come in naturally and organically. And hopefully we get that Marvel quality of them being brought in that just has a super hype. Even if it takes 2 movies, the fact that this is building the hype for that, hopefully, is pretty cool and smart on their behalf, because you can't just rush something like that, as we've been waiting nearly, 2 decades now for something like that? Close to? I'm excited. Either way, I hope you're excited about this, and I want you to comment down below what you're excited most about and who you can't wait to see in the series, because we did see Morph kind of teasing other characters when he turned into Lady Deathstrike and Sabretooth for that last little scene and just had us go, oh right, those guys. But I want to know who you want to see and what you're excited about most. And thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure you catch me at 9 p.m. on Thursday nights, Eastern Standard Time, on twitch.tv/ILLTV4K, where you can catch me streaming all sorts of awesome games. Right now, we're doing Dragon's Dogma 2, because of course we are. But last but not least, and I mean last but not least, don't forget, you're watching ILL TV, where if it's pop culture, you know it pops up here. You're watching ILL TV, where if it's pop culture, you know it pops up here.